Welcome to Black Health Matters. I'm Darryl Armistead, your host. This episode is a Zoom recording of Howard University group session led by Dr. Clive Callender,
who's actually her CV and bio sketch is always exciting to read because she's been so associated with excellence all of her career. And, her participation with us is something that has been wonderful through the years, and we're excited that she could be with us again today. Actually, I just interviewed a student for medical school who you had sent a letter of recommendation.
Oh,
It's got a name.
Small world. Small world.
Yeah.
Excellent student. Please admit her.
Okay, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Callender. Thank you, and good morning, everyone. Nice to see you again.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. So when Dr. Callender sent the request, I wanted to say, you don't even have to ask, but I was nice. And I said, I'll be delighted to. Because I always love hanging out with these groups. So Dr. Callender, I was wondering, is it at all possible to share my screen? No.
It is.
John?
Yeah, it is. It is possible.
All right. Wonderful. Please.
I didn't tell you this, and I'm sorry. I apologize. That she is a doctor of nutrition, and so that's what she'll be talking to us today.
Yeah. So as I pull up my screen or attempt to pull up my screen, and if you were in the group that I spoke with earlier, you would know that my presentations tend to be very interactive. So as you probably heard Dr. Callender say, or you probably didn't, I am an instructor, I am faculty, and so it's difficult to separate, come out of the classroom when I make these presentations. So I'm always asking questions and asking you to participate. So that I think that really gives you more than you can ever expect in terms of these presentations, because you hear what you want to hear, you get your questions answered. So essentially, I hope that the presentation can be more of an interaction where I will present a few slides, but I would prefer if the presentation were more so what you wanted to hear and to be able to answer your questions.
So far, so good.
Great. Okay, wonderful. Love it. Yeah, exactly. So my daughter, who is now 13, Dr. Callender knew her when she was in my belly, but she's now 13. So that shows you how long we go back. I won't tell you about that history, but anyway. And so she has this series of books that she read when she was smaller, and it was I survived World War I, I survived World War II, I survived the Great Depression, I survived everything. So I have coined that term to say I survived COVID-19. And so the whole presentation will be focused on COVID-19 and on all of these disease processes that occur in this whole new era of COVID-19. And I've titled it Nutrition 101. Probably for you, it's Nutrition 102 because you've had some nutrition education previously. So let's get started. By the end of today, I would hope that you are able to explain the role of diet in producing inflammation, to describe the basic foundation of a healthy diet, and to recognize foods that should be reduced in the diet. And so why are we here today, or why am I here today? Well, first, primarily because of COVID-19 and the fact that nobody on the face of the earth today, unless you're living under a rock, know about COVID-19. Okay, so COVID-19 is just pervasive. It has taken over life. And so, however, it is interesting to note that COVID-19, the people with COVID-19 don't do too well when they have the already existing diseases that we knew of: the obesity, the heart disease, the renal disease, the diabetes, the cancer, respiratory disorders, arthritis, you name it. However, the one thing that is common among all of these, the pre-existing conditions and COVID, what I refer to as public enemy number one, is inflammation or excessive inflammation. Of course, a certain amount of inflammation in the body is healthy. That's how the body heals itself, or one of the steps in healing. However, when that inflammation becomes excessive, we have, enter obesity and all of these other diseases. And then once we get COVID, the fact that we have these diseases just makes our outcomes, our COVID outcomes, exponentially worse. And that is what we are seeing. I actually work with bariatric patients, those who are preparing to go for surgery. And the stories are just so sad in terms of these patients losing their family members. And of course, we know obesity runs in families. So to the extent that I am seeing a family member with obesity, 9 times out of 10, the other family members have obesity as well. And the stories are really sad in terms of, and when I ask them, what is your biggest motivation for getting this surgery? Because really, I would prefer them, of course, to do it, without the surgery. But sometimes surgery is absolutely necessary in terms of their prognosis. And they said to me, well, my biggest motivation to do the surgery is that I just lost my brother, who also had obesity, and I'm afraid that if I don't do something and I get COVID, I would suffer that fate as well. And so there's no getting away that all of these other diseases worsen your outcome with COVID. And the fact that inflammation is at the bottom of all these diseases. So with or without COVID, even before COVID came onto the stage, we knew that the causes of death in the United States were poor diet and inadequate physical activity. So that was a given even before COVID. Second only to tobacco, and I believe it's probably at that level now in terms of being equivalent to tobacco use and causes of death. And of course, general wellness. Even if you're like Dr. Callender and myself, who don't have any disease processes, right? Dr. Callender, the epitome of health, you still need a healthy diet to help you maintain that general wellness. All right. And of course, overall improvement in health. Again, going back to my patients, my bariatric patients, we have this discussion that, yes, I know that you're seeing me for weight loss, but weight is not the end all and be all. The positive habits, the healthful habits are what we're after, with a positive side effect of weight loss. So we are really after the general improvement in health. Can you walk down the road 6 blocks without fainting? Can you bend down to tie your shoelace? When you get to get your cholesterol checked, is it within normal range? Those kinds of things. And if we are accomplishing those, we will likely have a positive side effect of weight loss. It's my favorite slide. I can talk all I want. I can talk until right? We live in an environment that is not conducive to health. Okay? So if you can't see this, it says weapons of mass expansion, meaning, right, with your weight. And we have the McDonald's and the Burger King and, right? I love that guy. He gets my jokes. So when I used to drive to Howard, I would, I live up in Marlboro, and so my drive home was I took the scenic route, and this is what I saw on my way home. So if I left work and I was tired and it was late, sometimes I would leave work at 6:30, and I'm driving home, I'm tired. I run into all of these restaurants. I hit the McDonald's, and as soon as I come out of Howard, there's the McDonald's, and I managed to bypass McDonald's, and I'm on my way home. And there comes the Checkers, and a little bit up is the Popeyes, and then by the time I turn the corner, there's another McDonald's, etc., 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 etc. Now I'm a dietitian with 20 years training, and I know the effects of these foods. So my ability to withstand these foods is a little bit stronger than most. Okay. So when we talk about inflammation, and then we talk about these weapons of mass expansion, and I'm going to add inflammation to the slides, you're almost fighting a losing battle, but not really. The good news, there is good news. Most of these chronic diseases can be prevented through proper diet and physical activity. Okay, so even if you already have these diseases, you can control it with a healthful diet and physical activity. And the other good thing is that a healthful diet provides you all the nutrients that you need to do all of that, plus to fight this inflammation that's wreaking havoc now across the world. And if you notice, when we're going back to the whole obesity issue, if you notice the United States, I call it now, unfortunately, I call it COVID country. right? But if you look at United States compared to its peer countries economically, we are topping the list in obesity as well. So we're not doing too well in terms of general health. So it makes it's not surprising that we're not doing too well in COVID either. Now, of course, there's some other things that I don't want to get into during this presentation that have led to what we're experiencing now with our COVID rates. But there's no getting away that the health status of our nation is also contributing to the outcomes that we're seeing in terms of health outcomes of COVID. So the good news is that it's never too late to start practicing these healthful lifestyles, including diet and physical activity. I will not go into too much physical activity now. This part is focused on diet, with the intention that Dr. Callender is going to ask me to come back to talk about physical activity next. All right. So what do we do? What do we do in all this pandemonium? First, we set small, realistic goals. And a very good place to start is the My Plate system. And I have a link here, which I will not go into now because I don't want to, mess up a good thing that we have going. And technology doesn't always work. But you can always visit Choose My Plate, and I'm sure you probably have, because we've been under that guidance system for several years now. And a lot of people have issues with the My Plate guidance system and the dietary guidelines, because they say, okay, well, I thought that plant-based was the way to go. However, if you really stop a minute and look at the My Plate system, it is essentially plant-based, right? So half of it is fruits and vegetables. Another almost quarter of it is grains. And as far as I remember from my nutrition classes, all of those come from plants, okay? And then a little part says protein. It never said animal protein, it says protein. It can be from a plant or it can be from an animal. So essentially, the guidance system under which we operate is plant-based. All right, so interpretation is a beautiful thing. So when you have a minute, check out that website. It also gives you a lot of resources in terms of, the various questions that you might ask. In terms of people always say, okay, well, it's much less expensive to eat fast food than it is to eat fruits and vegetables. Well, let's take a look at that. Maybe not. I recently did a session for one of these sororities on campus, and we did that. We looked at the fast food, the cheapest fast food meal that we could find. We prepared one at home, and guess what? The one prepared at home came in less expensive than the cheapest fast food meal. All right, so all it takes is some planning. And of course, this is the icon. I'm sure everybody is familiar with this in terms of what I was talking about here. Here, the fruits, the vegetables. This is essentially plant-based, right? And then your protein, and of course your dairy up here. And I could spend another 6 hours talking about the controversy over dairy and plant versus animal and so on. But that's not today's. That's not the goal for today. So back to this fire of information that we're talking about, that is at the seat of every disease process that you could possibly have. All right, whether it's the arthritis, the diabetes, the obesity, the renal failure, and now enter big time, big brother, COVID. You've heard, you cannot get through a news item or a research article having to do with COVID without hearing this fancy term, cytokine storm. All right. And so that's what a cytokine storm is. Essentially, it's excessive inflammation, because the body is, calling on all these cytokines, which is essentially inflammation. So if we can extinguish that fire of inflammation, then we fare better in terms of outcomes, both with COVID and with all of the other disease processes that are fueled by this fire. So let's get into the practical aspect. How do we reduce this fire? And essentially, there are certain foods that cause the fire. So if you want to reduce the fire, the sensible thing to do would be to reduce those foods that cause the fire. And the ones that cause the fire, the ones that are high in sugar, ones that are high in saturated fat, ones high in sodium, low in fiber, low in vitamins and minerals, and low in immune-enhancing antioxidants. But what does all that mean, though? So how do we reduce those? So focus on the food label. That's a powerful tool. Look for sugar, sodium, saturated fat. Forget calories, okay? If we get all these other things in control, calories will eventually sort out themselves. But as I say to my patient, come back. Oh, well, I hit my target for 1,200 calories. Yeah, 1,500 calories. I'm doing fantastic. Yeah, but your saturated fat is through the roof. All right, you're losing weight, but your body's is in inflammation down. Okay, so look for sugar, sodium, saturated fat in the label. And what you see on the screen here are my magic numbers. You will not find them on any internet site. These are based on my almost 25 years of practice in terms of looking at foods, studying foods, and looking at the foods that tend to be the ones that are processed. And processed foods are the things that we're trying to get away from. And so to the extent that the food has more than 200 milligrams of sodium, more than likely that food is what we call ultra processed. To the extent that it has more than 5 to 9 grams of sugar, it's going to be ultra processed. Same thing, saturated fat. And if it's on the fiber now, we're looking for more than 2 grams of fiber, because if it has less than that, that means that it's likely processed. And so talking about our mass weapons. Now, if you were, well, of course, we all here were alive 20 years ago. And so you may or may not remember what a hamburger looked like. Back in the day, it would have been 3,333 calories. Today, almost twice the size. Why? Okay. Same thing with pizza. We could have enjoyed pizza and not suffer the consequences. Okay, but look at today. Look at the size. 850 calories, 350 calories more. All right. And so if you're having more calories, it means you're having more sodium, you're having more saturated fat, and those things that are going to fuel that inflammation. Same thing, spaghetti and meatballs. Dr. Callender and I will not talk about our day at Howard cafeteria, right? But when you go into a cafeteria, you look at the serving sizes that you're getting way more than what the body actually needs. All right. And so those are the foods that we want to decrease. Now certainly there must be foods in the diet that we want to increase that will help us to put out the fire as well. So first of all, we don't want to cause the fire, but if the fire does exist, we want to be able to extinguish that fire. And so now we're going to focus. So earlier I said, focus on the label, right? That's what I just said. I said, focus on the food label. Now I'm telling you to focus on the foods that do not have a label. What nonsense is that? Does anybody have an idea what I mean by saying focus on foods that do not have a label?
Fruit?
There you go. You ever seen a food label on fruit?
Nope.
No, right? No
Fresh
food label
vegetables.
on vegetables. You got it. No food label on fruits. No food label on vegetables. And why is that? Because we don't need to worry about it. It's right. Everything that it has is beneficial for us, not processed. And so those are the things that we focus on. And that goes back to that whole plant-based diet. And if we're following a more plant-based diet, like the My Plate suggests, then we don't have to ever be bothered to take time to read those labels, because there's nothing in them that needs to be, put on a label in terms of any sort of disclaimer. Fantastic. So to do that, make half your plates fruits and vegetables, make at least half of your grains whole, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And if you do drink dairy, then switch to 1%. And don't be fooled by these plant milks either. You have to be very careful in terms of reading their labels and seeing what they're adding to these plant-based milks to make them as nutritious as the dairy. So practical questions that you would ask yourself at the end of the day. Did I have at least one fruit today? Well, if I didn't, now is a good time to do that, especially in the era of COVID. If God forbid you did have COVID and you were hospitalized, now they're discharging folks with zinc, vitamin C, vitamin D. And if you didn't get it the first time around, fruits and vegetables are the highest sources of vitamin C. Okay. All right. So next, so you had one fruit, wonderful, but did you have two? Because that is a recommendation, right? Or more. Did you have at least one vegetable today? And if not, now would be a good time to have one. And if you had one, did you have 2 and 3? Because that is the recommendation. Okay. Did you have whole grain today in terms of were all of your starches processed, or was some of them whole? And if the answer is no, then now might be a good time to look at introducing some whole grain. Now, of course, if you're on dialysis, that puts a whole new spin on things, because foods that are typically whole grain tend to have a lot of phosphorus and potassium, and then we know that with dialysis, those are nutrients that we have to look at. So of course, there's always a caveat. Like I said to my students, nothing is ever black and white in nutrition. I'm sorry, folks. Okay, there's always a caveat. And so clearly, when I'm talking about whole grains, I'm not talking about the folks who are on dialysis, because I wouldn't dare give a presentation like this for folks who are on dialysis, because there's just too many variables that we have to consider. And if you drank milk, what type of milk did you drink? Okay, was it whole? Was it 2%? And don't be fooled by 2% milk. 2% milk has almost as much fat as whole milk. So for us to get the benefit, we would need to go all the way down to 1%. I would say fat-free as well, but the good old book says do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. And I will not be drinking any fat-free milk anytime soon, because I think it's water. And so, I tend to recommend 1% or fat-free if you can handle it. Okay, because my philosophy is food must be enjoyed, and my food that I consume has to be worth it. So if it's not worth the calories, I'm not consuming it. So if you did drink milk, what type of milk was it? Was it whole, 2%, 1%, fat-free? And if it was if you drank the plant-based milk, was it the original one, or was it the sweetened one? Was it soy that has more protein, or was it almond milk, which is essentially, water and some almonds added to it? So it depends. And if you, right, so that's the qualifications on the milk that I was just talking about. Now, beware, and this is my favorite one, beware of the wolves in sheep's clothing. Okay, breakfast cereals, one in particular, high in fiber, but check out the sugar. Okay, yogurt and prebiotic drinks, my favorite one. I had a patient yesterday, and I'm drinking my probiotic supplement, and it's yogurt and it's good for gut health. Absolutely, yes, it is. Let's take a look at the label. Little tiny bottle like this had 12 grams of sugar, which is essentially 3 teaspoons of sugar. So I said to her, okay, so on the one hand, you're having the probiotic to improve your gut health, but on the other hand, you're just pouring in the sugar to destroy what you just did by adding the probiotic. So that's why I say beware of wolves in sheep's clothing. Same thing with cereal bars and granola. For some reason, folks think, and I'm not going to call names because I'm a dietitian and I cannot endorse brands and bash brands and so on, but for some reason, folks think that granola bar in the green packet is healthy. And the analogy I like to make is that you might as well eat a Krispy Kreme donut because it has as much sugar. Granola bars have as much sugar as a Krispy Kreme donut. Right? So that's the thing. So you now have a choice. If you're going to eat a granola bar, Dr. Manuel has given you the permission to eat a Krispy Kreme because they're equivalent in terms of the sugar. Okay? Cheese, another favorite one of mine. I love cheese. And it's a good source of protein, good source of calcium, but it also tops the list in terms of saturated fat. And you just heard me say that saturated fat is public enemy number 1 in terms of causing inflammation and fueling inflammation. Then another favorite one is my nutrient waters, right? Another market employee, packed with nutrients and vitamins and minerals, but you also have 30 grams of added sugar. Okay, you might as well go and eat the fruit if you're after the fruit, the minerals and the vitamins. And then there's the good old wheat bread. What type of bread are you consuming? Oh, wheat bread, of course, wheat bread. Okay, well, let's take a look at the bread. Do you have a loaf of that bread in your pantry? And this is one of the good. Now, there are not too many redeeming qualities about COVID, but this is one of the things that one of the opportunities that COVID has opened in terms of my being able to work with patients from their home, and they can go to their pantry and bring me back a food, and we can look at those foods and really evaluate them. So they would go to their pantry, get the wheat bread, bring it back, and it's honey wheat, it's cracked wheat, it's any kind of wheat, but it's surely not whole wheat, right? But because the way it's marketed, our folks think that it is whole wheat bread when really it's just white bread. with the name wheat in it. And if you think about it, bread is made from wheat. I mean, wheat is one of the things that is used to make flour, which is used to make bread. So all breads, a substantial, significant proportion of our breads are made from wheat, which is very different from whole wheat. So when they say I eat wheat bread, they're actually correct because their bread is made from wheat, just not whole wheat. Okay. Then we have the sports drinks, which unless you are an elite athlete, there really is no benefit of sports drinks. Primarily because, again, it goes back to the sugar. Sports drinks do have sugar, and that sugar is there to replenish the stores that the athlete would need after an event or during an event. And then my all-time favorite one is juicing. Again, another patient. Yesterday, we're going through her recall, and she is juicing so that she can get the maximum absorption of the nutrients from her juice. And I said, okay, fantastic. What are you doing with the stuff that comes out that's not the juice? Oh, I trash that. Well, if there ever was a sin in the food world, that would be it. So essentially what you're doing is taking out the sugar from the fruits and the vegetables, and you're throwing away the good part, the part that the body really is crying out for and asking you and begging you for. You just took that and you threw it in the trash, and you kept the sugar to drink. And so we went a bit further and we said, how to get that glass of juice that you're drinking? How many fruits and vegetables did you use? Oh, about 7 or 8. Okay, would you sit down and eat 7 or 8 vegetables in one setting? No. So exactly. So that those 7 or 8 vegetables could have been consumed throughout the day. You would have gotten the juice from them, but you would have also gotten the powerful antioxidants and fiber and nutrients that the body needs and is crying out for, especially at this time during COVID. And so this is what these are my list of wolves in sheep's clothing that sort of derail our efforts, unknowingly derailing our efforts to achieving optimal health. And it's through no fault of our own. These folks spend millions and billions of dollars in terms of their marketing strategies, getting you to believe that these foods are actually good for you when they're not. And so what about the wolves themselves? Those were the wolves in sheep's clothing, but let's not forget the wolves themselves, right? So fast foods. It is virtually, I wouldn't say impossible, but it is near virtually impossible to live a healthful life free of diseases if you are consuming fast foods regularly. Okay, now I'm not saying on the trip to Florida where you stop into McDonald's or whatever and you get that McDonald's once, twice a year. Okay, fine, but not what I'm seeing in terms of my patient population 3 and 4 and 5 times a day. A week, sorry. Okay, same thing with processed foods. One of the things that we do in my practice is that we go through a pantry checklist at the first visit. And you may or may not be surprised to see what the pantry checklist comes out at in terms of the results of that pantry checklist. And so essentially it consists of a list of foods, and I check yes, no, present in the pantry checklist. And 9 times out of 10, if there are 12 processed foods that I identify, the results come back with all checklists for all 12 foods in the pantry, because that's what we see when we go to the supermarkets. All right, the fast foods, processed foods, frozen dinners, which come in the category of processed foods, but sometimes we're not looking at that sodium, unsaturated fat. The calories might be okay, it might have the fiber, but the saturated fat and the sodium are just through the roof. And then of course your sugary drinks, which range from soda to your vitamin drinks to yogurt to and any of these other drinks that they add the sugar to. All right, and the innocent grandchildren. Anybody knows why I have that there? And so a key theme that I've seen among patients is that we're going through the pantry checklist. And how about frozen breaded fish sticks, chicken nuggets, tenders? Oh yes, I have that in my pantry, but it's not for me, it's for the grandchildren. Okay, how about cookies, pastries, cakes, puddings, Pop-Tarts? Yes, that's in the pantry, but it's not for me, it's for the grandchildren. Okay, how about sodas, juices? Yes, that's there, but it's not for me, it's for the grandchildren. And so my response to that invariably is, okay, so let me make sure I understand this. You're not consuming the toxic foods, the poison, but you're feeding it to the grandchildren, right? And so we must realize and recognize that the poor grandchildren are the innocent bystanders in all of it. Obesity is genetic, so many of these other disease processes, and they start as early as the age of the grandchildren. By 10 years old, children have begun, humans have begun to build up plaque in the arteries. Okay, so continue to feed them the processed foods and the breaded foods and so on. You're contributing to the buildup of that plaque, which will eventually lead to a heart attack very early in life. And so, but if we don't know these things, if we're depending on the food manufacturers and the food industry to make us healthy, it's not going to happen. So we have to arm ourselves with that knowledge so that we are making ourselves healthy as well as the generation that follows us. And so one of the most powerful weapons that we can have is the food label. And you probably can't see this because it's small, but this is the new food label. And one of the good things that I like about the new food label is that it really focuses on the things that we really need to know. First of all, it will tell you what the serving size is. And that's a frequent mistake that we make. So the thing might be 230 calories, and you're thinking, oh, well, it's for the whole packet, but it's only for 1/2 cup of that packet. And so if you ate the whole packet, you're now getting, 600 and something calories. Same thing with sugar. And so there's naturally occurring sugar, right? So if you look here, total carbohydrate is 37 grams. You got 4 grams of fiber, but it tells, and 12 grams of sugar, but it tells you that of those 12 grams of sugar, 10 of them were added sugar. So what this means is that it probably has 2 little raisins, which is naturally occurring sugar, but everything else is added in terms of table sugar, right? Another common example would be something like milk. Milk contains lactose, which is naturally occurring sugar, and that's fine. However, a chocolate milk would have the naturally occurring sugar plus a whole heap of added sugars. And so if the number of added sugars if the number of added sugars matches or is very close to your total sugars, that means that all of the sugars were added sugars. None of that sugar is natural sugar. Okay, so I'll say that again. If your included sugars is close to or equal to your total sugars, that means that all of the sugar in that product is artificial, has been added. None of it is naturally occurring sugars, like from your juice and your milk and so on. All right. And so your label is very powerful. Those things that you focus on, like I talked about earlier, your sodium, right? Your saturated fats, and your sugars. If you focus on those, then that means that the foods that you're bringing into your house are more than likely the more healthful ones. And to the extent that you have healthful foods in the house, that's what you have available to eat. By the same token, if you bring in the unhealthful foods, that's what you would most likely be eating because that's what you have in your environment. All right. So, is everybody at home, or is anybody at home? All right. Great.
Everybody.
All right. So, so are there any volunteers to do a pantry check? We don't have to, but are there any volunteers to do a pantry check? Anybody wants to bring back their favorite food for us to look at? But you don't have to.
I got one right here that I'm embarrassed to show you.
No, but that's not what it's about. It's about learning, right? So let's learn from, and you never know, it may or may not be, right? Some of the patients, when I say to them, bring me back that food, and they think, oh my gosh, this is terrible. But it turns out that it's an absolutely fantastic food, right?
Okay.
The thing is for you to learn. Okay. So let's go down those numbers that we had. So on the label, let's look at the saturated fats.
Okay. Saturated fat is 1.5 grams.
Okay.
6%.
All right. So if you went back to Dr. Manuel's magic numbers. Let's see. All right, 1.5. So ka-ching, ching, ching. So far, so good. Let's keep it going. What about the sodium?
Oh boy. 90 milligrams.
90 milligrams. Okay, it's less than 200. Ding, 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 ding. So far, so good.
Really? Okay.
All
okay.
right. And then let's look at if it's a food that lends itself to sugar. Let's look at sugar. How much sugar?
Oh
Added
boy.
sugar.
Added sugars, 12 grams.
All right. So that's the only one that we're a little bit over. And what about fiber?
I don't see fiber on here.
So-
this is yogurt.
Okay, so go down to carbohydrates. Midway the label.
Total carbohydrate is 27 grams.
Okay, and then right under that it should say dietary fiber.
No, I don't see it.
So that means it has absolutely none. All right. So now you can reveal the product. Let's see the product.
It's Yoplait yogurt.
There you go. So you see what I was
Let's
what
see.
did I just say in terms of those wolves in sheep's clothing?
Yeah, I can hold it up to the camera a little bit.
There
Yeah,
you
see?
go. Yeah, see? So that one is this one right here. And so it met all of the guidelines until we talked about the sugar. Yep. However, there is good news. There's yogurt and there's yogurt, right? So now what we do is that we take that a step further, and when we go to the supermarket, we look for a yogurt that doesn't have in as much added sugar.
Okay.
Some
Sounds good to
people,
me.
some people like myself, I would go, straight. I would go straight for the plain one that doesn't have any sugar and any fat, and I mix it with fruit, and that gives me the taste that I'm looking for. But if you're not one of those people who has acquired that taste yet, you can take it a step by step. So you look for one that has 9, you look for one that has 8, until you can get to the plain one. Sounds good.
Very
So
good.
not too bad, but still room for improvement. And that's what I say to my patients. It's all a process. It's a journey toward the most healthful version of you. All right. And so it's a step-by-step process. Fantastic. Wonderful. Thank you, sir. What's your name?
My name is John Buchanan. I think my microphone might have frozen.
Yes, as you were going to say your name. What's your name?
John Buchanan.
John Buchanan. Thank you, Mr. Buchanan. I appreciate that. Fantastic. All right. Does anybody else want to give a try? All right. Well, I think we got the point, and you were absolutely fantastic in terms of reading that label and finding those values and showing us exactly what we mean by in terms of these wolves in sheep's clothing. So on a whole, yogurt is actually one of those foods that we would recommend because of its probiotic benefit. However, we have to be careful that these manufacturers are not taking a perfectly good food and ruining it by putting in the added sugars that we don't need that are going to contribute to that inflammation. All right. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Mr. Buchanan. All right. So it's been a pleasure thus far. I think I took up almost 40 minutes of your time. I love to talk, but I was able to do that relatively quickly. And so at this point, I would open up the floor to any questions that you might have.
I have a question about eggs.
Uh-huh.
Are they good or are they not?
All right. So you remember earlier on I said it's never a black and white with nutrition. And
Right.
so eggs is one of those things that has gone through its share of it's good, it's bad, it's good, it's bad. The bottom line is that eggs are an excellent source of protein. However, they do contain a considerable amount of fat and saturated fat because they are an animal source.
Mm-hmm.
And so eggs are to be treated as your animal product in your diet. And so if you are having chicken and you wanted to substitute an egg, then that would be where it comes in as a good thing. However, if you are having a salad and the salad already has chicken, and you're adding the egg, then all you're doing is now increasing the amount of saturated fat in that salad. If you're having one first and that's your breakfast meat, not a problem. But if you're having 3, 4, 5, then in an omelet, then you've just increased that saturated fat 3, 4, 5-fold. With regard to its name that it got with cholesterol, eggs do contain a significant amount of cholesterol. However, we know now that no amount of cholesterol that we eat in the diet could impact the amount of cholesterol that our body already produces. And what we've found in terms of that factor in the egg that is contributing to the cholesterol is actually the saturated fat, which the egg does contain. So that's a roundabout way of saying that the egg in and of itself is a good food. However, it's how we use that egg that can make it into a food that can, do some harm in terms of the saturated fat content.
Thank you.
Sure, you're welcome.
What are your thoughts about replacing sugar with honey?
Good question. So it depends on why you're replacing the sugar with honey. So if you're a person that, and I'll use the analogy to compare apples to apples. If you are a person that is looking at weight loss, and you're having a problem with adding 60 spoons of sugar to your coffee, or 70 spoons, and I'm saying that because my brother used to do that. So 70 spoons of sugar in the coffee, and you're saying, well, I'm not going to use sugar, I'm going to use honey. In that regard, there's no difference, because 70 spoons of sugar has actually a little bit fewer calories than 70 spoons of honey. It's sugar, it's calories, and if you're looking at it from a weight loss perspective, then there's going to be no difference. However, if you are using honey, if you're already using sugar in moderation and you want to switch to something that's less processed, then honey in that case is something positive to move. So it depends on the reason for moving to honey. Honey is, of course, always going to be less processed than sugar, and that's where we want to go. That's the mantra. Forget the processed, go to the natural. And so in that way, honey would be the choice. However, if you're looking at it from a weight loss perspective, then you still want to be able to reduce the amount of honey that you're having overall.
What's so bad about processed foods?
Well, processed foods, Dr. Callender, has in those public enemy number one causing foods that we talked about. So public enemy number one is the inflammation, and processed foods are exceedingly high in all of those components. They're high in the sugar, they're high in the sodium, and they're high in the saturated fat. Number one, to give them shelf life, and number two, to give them that taste factor so that you continue coming back for them. And so we have the ultra processed foods. Now, of course, every food is processed at some point, at some level. So even like your brown rice is, we're not going to the paddy and getting, the rice and eating it. It has to be processed. However, there are levels of processing. So we have the brown rice, which is little processed, versus we have the white rice, which is ultra processed. Or we have the white flour, which is ultra processed, versus the whole wheat flour, which is processed but not as processed. So what we're referring to here are the ultra processed foods that not only are stripped of all the fiber and the nutrients, but they're adding the sodium, adding the saturated fat, adding the sugar, and in the process, adding this alphabet of chemicals that nobody knows what they're doing to the body. So that's what we're talking about in terms of processed foods. And then those in turn fuel that inflammation, which in turn fuels all of the diseases that we're seeing. And if you look at the world, if you look at the place where I'm from, where when I grew up, I would go out to the tree and pick a mango. You didn't have those diseases existing. But however, once we started, adopting what I call the SAD diet, Standard American Diet, you started seeing these disease processes overtaking those tiny countries.
How about eating 6 fruits a day?
6 fruits a day? Yeah. So again, we have to put that into context. 6 fruits a day is fantastic if your blood glucose is completely controlled and you're able to fit those 6 fruits a day in terms of your carbohydrate allowance. If you don't have a problem with carbohydrate, with diabetes and blood glucose control, then 6 fruits a day is something that you can aspire to, and something that would be recommended and that would be beneficial. because we are 6 fruits a day. You're getting all those things that are fighting the inflammation and fighting. If you're fighting inflammation, then you're fighting these diseases as well. Most Americans, over 80% of Americans do not get enough, even the minimum number of fruits and vegetables to that. So if you're having 6 fruits a day, wonderful. Once it's not taking the place of vegetables. So some folks will say, well, I don't like vegetables, but I'll eat 6 fruits. You're eating 6 fruits, but you're not eating any vegetables. Well, vegetables contain some nutrients that fruits don't contain. Even though the fruits are wonderful and they're good for you, they don't contain the same nutrients that the vegetables would provide. And so that's why we always talk about this balanced diet, because there are no one group of foods or no one foods that contains all of the nutrients that your body needs to function. And once your body does not have those nutrients, it will tell you. Okay, so if you're lacking in the B vitamins that you would have gotten from your grains, you're going to be lethargic, you're going to be tired, because those nutrients are not there to help the body transform your food into your energy. So whatever it is your body is lacking, it's going to be manifested in some physical sign or symptom. And so that's why it's important to have all of the foods present in your day on a daily basis.
I have
Dr. Manuel, go ahead, John.
Yeah, I wanted to know, John, that label that you put up about the yogurt, did I see 0 cholesterol on that?
He was paying attention.
No, it's 10 milligrams and 3% cholesterol.
Okay. Katherine, did I see something that you showed that had 0 cholesterol?
So are you referring to the label? Yeah, there you go. So this example showed 0 cholesterol. Yes.
Oh, okay. Thank you. That's what I was looking for. Thank you.
Sure. And that was just an example, but you're paying attention. Look at that. Wonderful.
Katherine,
Yes.
can I ask a question?
Sure.
When you talked about juicing
Mhm.
and throwing out the nutrients, what about a smoothie? I've started making green smoothies with the vegetables and fruit, but I only use water and no yogurt. And I pack a Splenda.
There you go.
It is not the best tasting, but it's good. I'm drinking it, but it gives me my 6 servings of fruit and my vegetable. Is that okay, or should I be doing something else?
Oh yeah, that's perfect. And that's exactly what I said to my patient. Why not try a smoothie? Because in that way, you're getting the benefit of everything. You're getting the benefit of the juice that you want, the taste that you want, but you're also getting those powerful nutrients that you were throwing away in the garbage. So a smoothie is one of the highly recommended ways of getting your fruits and your vegetables in an easy way. Now there are tricks to the trade in terms of trying to get it to taste, to be palatable, and that calls for some experimentation in terms of which fruits pair themselves better. So, for example, you might use a sweeter fruit like pineapple if you're using some of the more tart fruits like the berries. The other thing that I've found that does wonders, and it's amazing how this happens. 2, if you're not allergic to nuts and you're not, watching your potassium and your phosphorus, 2 or 3 walnuts in that mixture. Beautiful, big change. A quarter of an avocado, humongous change. And so smoothies takes some experimenting with in terms of getting to that perfect taste that you're looking for, but a brilliant example of taking fruits and vegetables, getting them in a palatable way, in a practical way. Now, remember that I said that we are striving for perfection. We may not get there, but perfection is what we're striving for in terms of this healthful diet, as perfect as we can. And so eventually you're going to be able to make that smoothie without the Splenda. Once you've gotten to the point where you've gotten the taste right, then you're going to be able to do it without the Splenda, because keep in mind that the Splenda is now, an artificial chemical, a chemical that you're putting into that otherwise, pristine drink that's just fruits and vegetables. Now, if you have a problem with diabetes, the smoothie, you're going to have to work the fruits and vegetables into your diet just as how you would have worked the fruits into your diet. And so if you met with a dietitian said to you, especially if you're on insulin, Well, we want to make sure that your carbohydrate is consistent in the diet, and you would have been having one fruit for each meal. You want to apply that. So the amount of smoothie that you're having at one time would have to be controlled,
Okay.
right? The other thing is that you wouldn't want the smoothie, especially now if it has the walnuts and the avocado, that's a little bit different, but you wouldn't want to have the smoothie the first thing in the morning because you're coming off of a fast, and that introduction of a concentrated form of sugar into your body might cause a spike in the blood sugar. So it has to be done in the context of what your overall dietary recommendations is.
Okay. Thank
Dr.
you.
Manuel,
Great, sure.
I heard that about 30 years ago, a nutritionist suggested 6 small meals a day as opposed to 2 or 3 large meals. What's your take?
So again, my take is I take a very plant-centered approach. And so 6 small meals is the ideal in terms of, they say making sure that you're getting your nutrients in, making sure that you're forcing your body to be constantly working, which, there is the body does have to work to burn those meals. And so what the thinking is that if you are eating 6 times a day, then you're forcing your body to be active and to burn that energy, which was the thinking. However, enter, the world in terms of your work schedule, in terms of pushing the grandchildren all over the place, in terms of all these other things that you have to get done. Most people are not going to be able to fit in that six meals a day, right? However, what I say to folks is you want to establish a regular intake of meals. So that might be 3 meals, it might be 2 meals, but it might be, an apple here and a tangerine there and a few nuts here. They're not meals, but you're having a constant supply of food going into the body. And that's the other thing in terms of the labeling that we do. So we might say, well, I'm missing breakfast. Well, you might ask me, well, did you have breakfast this morning, Catherine? And I would say, yes, because I had a cup of coffee and I had an apple. And somebody would challenge me and say, well, that's not breakfast. That's not a meal. Yes, it is. Okay. All right. Or I might get up and it might be 11 o'clock and I haven't had anything. But by the end of the day, I am getting in the nutrients that I need, the calories that I need, and I'm perfectly healthy. So it really has to do with what works best for you. At the end of the day, the important thing is that we are getting in the nutrients that our body needs and the number of calories that our body needs to function. Now, there are extremes to that. Somebody will say, well, I can eat 1 meal and get all my calories and nutrients. Well, then we go back to that whole thing about, the body not working. So so if you're having just 1 meal, it means that you are resting the body and not giving it the ability to be able to work, because it takes work. The body has to work to burn food. And so the more energy you burn, the easier it is to maintain your weight. So if you're eating 1 time a day, that means that you're allowing the body just to chill out and not doing any work, store that energy that it should have been using to burn the food, right? Because you're only eating that 1 meal a day. So yes, the recommendation for that 6 meals a day, 6 meals and snacks a day was another way, a nice, easy way of saying, make sure that you're getting a constant supply of nutrients. Whether it's 6, whether it's 5, whether it's 4, there's really no magic number.
Okay, Dr. Manuel, I have a question, 2 questions. What type of bread should we eat? And when we make homemade bread from scratch, or cake or cookies, is that better than the process, or we should just stay away from cake and cookies?
Good question.
And bread.
Good question.
Oh,
So Dr. Maya's answer to that is the only things that I would say to stay away from. And you're trained to say no food is bad, but I'm very sorry. Nobody's going to tell me that a soda is okay or a McDonald's burger is okay. I'm so sorry. But in terms of cakes and cookies, I'll answer your question backwards. So in terms of cakes and cookies, absolutely, please do not give them up if that's what makes you feel good. I happen to love oatmeal cookies, and I make them all the time, except there you go, Mr. Buchanan, except during Lent, okay? However, I can make a mean oatmeal cookie. I've gotten it down where I can make it without sugar. Okay. And so I put dates, I put raisins, I put applesauce. And so you taste my cookie, my oatmeal cookie, and you would think that it was, store-bought with all the sugar. So I'm enjoying my cookie. Essentially, I'm having oatmeal and I'm having fruit, which I would have for breakfast anyway, but I'm adding a little bit of fat. And so when I do add the fat, I'm adding olive oil as opposed to butter, which the recipe would call for. And so that's taking a food that would have otherwise fueled inflammation and now bringing it to the point where you're actually fighting the inflammation with a dessert type food, because it's old-fashioned oatmeal, it's dates, it's applesauce, it's raisins, and it's olive oil. All right, and those are all foods that would have been recommended as part of a health food diet anyway. So it really depends on looking at foods through very, very different lens than you're accustomed to looking, and experimenting, not being afraid to experiment. Yes, when it started off, when I wasn't, people think that dietitians learn to cook in school. We don't, so we have to experiment as well. So I started off using the recipes that they have. I think no, this has just got too much sugar. There's something that can be done. And I started experimenting. So I would use, instead of 1 cup, I would use 3/4 cup. Oh, cookie's not tasting too bad with 3/4 cup. Then I would take it to 1/2 cup. Okay, not bad at all. Then I went to 1/4 cup. And then I said, okay, well, if I get to 1/4 cup, let's try it without the sugar. Perfect cookie. All right. So yes, don't give up your cookies and your cakes. Just find, experiment with healthful ways of making them. So that's the cookie cake. With the bread, any bread that is not processed is something that you want to strive for. So it might be whole oat bread, it might be whole wheat bread, it might be whole spelt bread, whole rye bread. The important thing is that first ingredient on the list must say whole. If it says anything else but whole, it means that it's not 100% whole wheat or whole spelt or whole whatever it is. If it says enriched, that's just another word of saying processed. All right, so it must say whole. The other thing in terms of bread, and I forgot to put it up there in terms of the wolves in sheep's clothing, bagels is another thing that runs us into trouble, because when we think about a bagel, we're thinking of a bagel as one. However, one bagel is the equivalent of 4 slices of bread.
Ooh.
Right. And so there are very few people that I know. There are very few people that I know would sit down and eat 4 slices of bread, breakfast, whatever. But it's very easy to consume a bagel. Okay. But just keep in mind that when you're having a bagel, you're having the equivalent of 4 slices of bread. So that's a little add-on to the question that you asked, Miss Tatum. Does that answer your question? Or your questions?
But what if you have a whole bagel?
So a whole bagel is like 4 slices of bread.
Of whole wheat or whole something.
So even if it's a whole wheat bagel, so now you're getting the fiber in, excuse me, but now we're talking about excessive calories in terms of weight management.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So yes, if you're having a bagel, you definitely want it to be whole, but then also either half of a bagel or do like me, where the mind is a powerful thing. So I use the mini bagels. I'm still having a whole bagel. Right, I'm still having 2 slices to open and put my reduced fat cream cheese on, but it's a mini bagel as opposed to a whole bagel. The other thing that I didn't mention in terms of acquiring these tastes, your taste buds do change throughout the month. And so in the case of the cookie, the first time you make the cookie, Ms. Tatum, you might go, no, I need my sugar. But if you would just enjoy it long enough, and the next time you try it again, by then your taste buds will adapt, and they adapt to these new foods that you are and the lower sugar that you are putting into your body.
What about English muffins?
Same thing. So you apply the same rules. So number 1, try to find the whole wheat, and then your English muffin is now you're back to the equivalent of the bread. So an English muffin is about 110 calories, which is like 2 slices of bread.
Okay.
But even so, the whole wheat. Now, unfortunately, and especially during COVID, I have not been able to find whole wheat bagels. So guess what? Guess I wouldn't be having any bagels because I refuse to eat white bagels. All right. So it is a little bit more difficult to find. But in that case, it's all a matter of where your compromises lie. And I'm not going to eat white bagels, so I guess I will not be having any bagels until I can find them in the supermarket. And I haven't learned how to make bagels yet, or I would have made my own, but I haven't learned how to make them yet. All right, great
Can you give us that oatmeal cookie recipe?
Well, it's not really a recipe. You know, what you do is you get a regular recipe and you just leave out the sugar and add a cup of Dole, you know, those little tiny fruit cups of unsweetened applesauce, a few dates, and some raisins, about a half a cup of raisins. And it takes experimenting. It doesn't always work out well the first time, but it takes experimenting until you get to what it is you're looking for. Yeah. All right. Any other questions?
Yeah, which is better, a little alcohol or no alcohol?
Little alcohol or no alcohol, huh? All right. So you're not going to like the answer to this. Well, maybe you will. Little alcohol, not a problem, right? Unless you're pregnant, and that's not going to be a problem for you, Mr. Armistead. So little alcohol, not a problem. But the new guidelines just lowered the recommendation for men to be that of the same of women. So it used to be 2 drinks for a man, 1 drink for a woman. They've now lowered that limit for men to the same as for women. So it's 1 drink a day, both for men and women. And 1 drink a day would be a 5-ounce glass of wine, a beer, 1.5 ounces of hard liquor, those kinds of things. So in that way, it's a little alcohol, not bad. You don't have to go to the point of no alcohol, unless of course the alcohol is leading to is worsening your reflux symptoms, or if you're a person that can't stop at 1, then in that case, you might want to not have it at all.
Which is the better?
Otherwise, what's that?
Which is a better diet, that 1 drink or no drink?
One drink, if it's something at the end of the day where it's a stressful world and you want to relax and you have that 1 drink, go for it. Of course none, is probably ideal, but no adverse effects of having that 1 drink a day.
I have a question on
Especially
that.
with red wine. Sorry, Mr.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I was going to say, I heard the Adventist pastors, those who are physicians, they say, okay, they say 1 little drink is okay, small one, wine or something, but then add up, for so many years, they've been drinking 20, 30 years. What does it do to the liver?
Right. And so that's why the limit is put on the drink, on the amount that you can drink. And so that's why the reduction now in the new guidelines to 1 drink, because it used to be 2 drinks. So that speaks to that cumulative effect that you're talking about, in that, we're living longer. And so our bodies have to suffer these consequences longer than previously, because we are on this earth longer than we used to be. And so those are some of the things that we consider in terms of placing those limits on alcohol. And so now men, the limit is 1 drink, just like women, because they're finding that at 1 drink, even for 20, 30 years, the liver is able to handle that, provided that you're not causing the liver to be inflamed by adding the saturated fat and the sodium and the sugar that we just talked about. You see what I mean? So 1 drink in the context of an otherwise healthy body is not going to be a problem. However, that same 1 drink in a body that's unhealthy, with all the organs inflamed, then Houston, we have a problem. So it really depends on the context.
Dr. Manuel, I had a question about arthritis. This is the first time I've seen that as one of those conditions like diabetes that could be a problem with COVID. What can we do with our diets to affect arthritis?
Right. And so arthritis was there with COVID because what they have in common is that inflammation.
Okay.
And so anything that you see ending in tis means inflammation. So arthritis is inflammation of the joints, right? And so an inflammatory diet is going to make arthritis worse because inflammation is at the bottom of it. So if you are adding to the body the sugar, the saturated fat, the sodium, all the lack of fiber, you are increasing the amount of inflammation systemically, which is also going to affect your joints, the inflammation in your joints. So to the effect that you are not putting those foods into the body to cause the inflammation in the first place, and then you're putting the good fats like the omega-3 fatty acids like that you find in salmon and walnuts and so on, you're putting that into the body, you're then decreasing any inflammation that would have been there even without putting the bad foods in.
I've started eating avocado. Is that
avocado? Yes, exactly. And those are what we call the good fats. All right. So the fats that we find in plants, the walnuts, the avocados, the flaxseed, all of those are good fats. The fats in nuts, the fats in fish like salmon. The only one thing though, caveat with nuts, again, I go back to one of my patients. He was having nuts throughout the day for his snacks. And okay, fantastic, you're having a healthy fat. However, let's talk about how much you're having. And he said, well, that's my go-to thing, and I would have a bag of pistachios, throughout the day. So a whole bag of pistachios. Okay, so now that's a tad bit excessive. So when we're talking about nuts, we're talking about a handful in terms of that beneficial amount, because after more than a handful now causes other problems in terms of excessive calories and excessive fat. Because even though it's a good type of fat, there is such a thing as too much fat in the body. Okay, and not to go into a biochemistry lecture, but there are different types of fats that we find in the body. You heard me talk about omega-3. There's also an omega-6 fat that we find that's very pervasive in the foods, and that is the one that will increase the inflammation in the body. So that's why we focus on omega-3s and so on.
I have a question about gluten, and a lot of what you're saying with the grains and all, unless they're whole grains, go back to gluten and inflammation.
Right.
Do you have any thoughts on gluten?
Sure, I do. But if you would just excuse me 1 minute, I realize that my battery's about to go, so I'll be back in 3 seconds, okay?
Okay, sure.
Dr. Callender, you can play some music.
Okay.
Or sing a song.
Yeah, right.
Oh, wow.
Dr. Callender has a beautiful voice. He can sing to us.
Mhm.
Almost everybody in this group are musicians.
Minus one.
Sylvia,
2, -2.
Sylvia Davis has a beautiful voice.
Let's hear it. Come on.
All right. Oh, Dr. Callender, no singing? I know you have a beautiful voice. I've heard it. All right. Okay. Thank you. So gluten, and that's one that has, before, I guess COVID is taking over everything now, so we don't hear too much about the gluten war. So gluten is a protein found in wheat products, and a few other grains. So primarily gluten and gliadin are the two proteins. And certain folks who have problems in their intestine, celiac disease, cannot tolerate gluten. And so for them, it causes a highly inflammatory process in the body, and they are unable to tolerate it. However, if you don't have celiac disease, then you should be able to tolerate gluten without a problem. Now, when it becomes a problem is when you find it in wheat products that are processed. And so yes, whole wheat products will have a little bit more gluten in them, but processed foods also have the gluten in it. So the question you have to ask is it the gluten, or is it the fact that the food is just so highly processed that the fiber and all those other beneficial nutrients have been removed? So if you don't have celiac disease, gluten should not cause you you shouldn't have any adverse effects.
Thank you.
Sure. another one of those mocked employees, because everything is gluten-free, 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 gluten-free. But I challenge you to look at some of those gluten-free foods, and you will notice that the gluten-free foods have more sugar and saturated fat and sodium than the regular foods. Right now, of course, like I said, if you have a problem with processing gluten, and that can only be diagnosed medically, it's not something that you can self-diagnose, then in that case, gluten would be an issue, but otherwise it shouldn't.
And if you make your own gluten, it's very high in protein.
What's that?
You make your own gluten, it's very high in protein.
Correct. So it is a protein. Yeah, absolutely. And to do that, you would just get that starch, because the wheat has the protein and the starch. So if you get rid of that starch, what you're left with, that elastic, gummy substance, is your gluten. But it's not a complete protein, as in your meats or something like that. So it shouldn't be used as a source of protein.
Well, Dr. Manuel, if there are no other questions, I can't thank you enough for broadening our horizons and frightening us about eating our food.
But I did give you a list of foods to eat, Dr. Callender, so you're good.
Well, thank you so much, and I deeply appreciate you always being available for us,
Absolutely.
even if we give you short notice.
Absolutely. You're one of my favorite groups. So anytime.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Take care and be safe.
Right. You too.
Okay.